Leon Edwards needs to move to middleweight. Now, these are the words. This will surprise you if you haven't seen this. Kamaru Usman said that. Kamaru Usman, who's a world champion at 170, who lost his belt at 170, and who promptly went up to middleweight, is telling his old opponent of 3 times, you, who are world champion and just lost your belt, need to move to middleweight. That's interesting. That's interesting. You got to look at that. Now, guys, what are the politics on that? Because logic doesn't step in here very often, and for good reason. But let me lay out what logic would be. If you're the champion of the world, if you are number 1, and you lose the very belt that you brought, you become the number 1 contender for your own belt. You don't go from world champion to number 3. You don't go from world champion to number 7. If you were the world champion and you lose, you now come down. You just lost to the number 1 contender. It's not as though anybody can say you can't be the world champion. You just were. But if you take that, what the hell do you want to do with it? Like some of the politics, there's so much politics in everything in life, but just so you understand the politics of the sport, like I haven't checked the rankings. I haven't, but I don't believe that Leon went to number 1 contender. I don't believe he went to the number 1 spot. Like what I'm saying to be true, that if he was the champion and he loses one, he comes down one. I don't believe that to be true, but one of the reasons it not to be true isn't because logically he shouldn't. It's the industry doesn't really get helped if you don't have parity, if you don't start bringing new guys in, so you shuffle the deck a little extra than you would. A little extra than you would for 2 or 3. If it was 2 versus 3 and 2 loses, he goes to 3 and 3 goes to 2. That would happen very commonly, but not as the champion. And Kamaru's right. Very much so. The mundane behind the scenes and the data that's going to be analyzed because it's collected after the fact. It's going to say how good of a champion was this guy. There's a lot of things that will go into that answer. I mean, ultimately, that's going to come down to buy rate, but how good of a champion was he? How good to work with was he? Not just did he honor our request for him to go do media, was media coming to us as the middleman and making requests to have him. It's going to be little things like this. And then those all tie in together, by the way. That formula all equals into your buy rate and spits it out the other side. But I'm sharing, if you had a welterweight that didn't draw and the belt came off of him, what's your likelihood to put him back in that same position where he could have the belt again? And I don't have those answers on Leon. I know Leon's time was coming. I could feel it inside. I could feel it in my own heart as a fan. This Leon Edwards train has finally left the station. Him being offered Islam at 300. Just for example, very big deal. And we're told that Leon accepted the fight, right? We're told Ramadan is what got in the way of that. I don't have proof of that. But it helped Leon. The speculation helped him. Him getting a main event. Him out-wrestling Covington in the 5th round. Him dealing with Covington at the press conference. Like, all of these things have really helped Leon, and I'm feeling that momentum. I don't have a wonderful answer for you for welterweight. Nobody does. I'm going to insert the guy whose last fight wasn't even at welterweight, and by the way, he lost. I'm going to put Kamaru Usman in. I would like to trick the deck. I would like to have the power, and I'll put my own boy Colby in. I see the reasoning behind Ian Gary. I just don't know if that undefeated young guy with 10 years of shelf life, if it's worth the risk right now. But at some point in life, you got to step up. So I would get that. I don't believe Rakhmonov, as clearly skilled as he is going to have his next fight for a title. His last fight was so long ago, I just feel that if his next one was for a title, at a minimum, that statement would have already been made. Do you guys disagree with anything that I'm saying right now? Because if you don't, then you see how Leon coming right back in against Blahal is a strong possibility. Again, I'm willing to hedge a bet that that is not what's going to happen. But I'm willing to raise a conversation with you guys that Leon versus Muhammad Part 2 is going to jump off the page and make as most sense and could be justified per the rankings, possibly better than any other fight I just suggested for him. Right? Now, Kamaru told him he should go to middleweight. And see, this is where it comes yes or no. If Leon's going to go in next against Muhammad, then this whole deal is up. But I don't believe that. I believe I can make a case for it. I don't believe that's going to happen. So, if he can't go in right away, what's the point of ever putting him in? What do you want him to do? You want him to go win 3 or 4 fights? He went 9 fights without a loss just to get this opportunity. You want him to go win 3 or 4 more fights? Who's he going to fight? Who's he got to go through? And Kamaru made a point. Kamaru didn't tell Leon just to go up. He told Leon to go to middleweight. And he said, most of those top guys aren't grappling. I think I know what he meant by that. When I first read it, I thought he meant you can go up there and out-grapple those guys. You got this grappling edge over these guys. I thought, no, Leon's not known for his grappling. So what Kamaru was suggesting is these guys were going to stand with him. And Kamaru apparently has gained a tremendous respect for the stand-up abilities of Leon. It's a really big compliment, but is it the right idea? I believe, guys, when you're later in your career, right, when you're new in your career, oh, by the way, what does that mean? No, it's not a tipping point of 30 years old. It's not a tipping point of 35 years old. All you do in your career is called a promotion, right? Promotion, you go up. Right? When you start going down, that's called a demotion. So no matter where you are, if you're going up, that's called young in your career. Once that stops, whether you reach the top, you reach number 4, it doesn't matter. Once your personal peak stops and the demotion begins. One time, first time, on your way up, that's young in your career. As soon as it goes the other way, even if you put the brakes on and you start bringing that, you're now later in your career. That is what that definition is. That's how that gets broken down. So, when you're later in your career, I've never seen anything work. I've never seen anything get you a fresh coat of paint faster and more effective than changing a weight class. In fact, I'll use Kamaru Usman as an example since he was the author of this statement. Kamaru lost at 170. His very next fight, which happened to be at 185, Kamaru is coming off a loss, taking on a younger and completely undefeated athlete. And you know what? It became a number 1 contenders match. That's what a big deal it was. If you can walk right in, coming off of a loss, up a weight class to a number 1 contenders match, you're in a pretty good position. And I wish Kamaru would finish this thought. I wish he'd go just a little bit further with it. I wish Kamaru would throw out an idea of an opponent or two, because it sounds as though he suggested to stay away from grappling. That's fine. That's fine. We move Leon up. We leave the Bo Nichols off the table. We leave the Chimaevs off the table. Who you putting in? Leon and Rob? That's an interesting fight. Very interesting fight. Leon versus Cannonier for the first time in history. Would you agree with me? Would you agree? Like, there's some matches, for sure. Sean used to be a 70-pounder. He's not the world champion. Leon inserted himself. How big can he get? I just like the idea by Kamaru Usman. And whether it gets dismissed or not, I hope it gets vetted. I hope it gets pursued. I hope it gets thought about. I hope Kamaru weighs in. And he gives us an idea or two that if he moved Leon to 185 pounds, who would he match him against?